Chapter 9. Can I get there by candlelight? Yes, and back again. If your heels are nimble and light. There was nothing for it. She would have to go back, and tonight. They would hardly keep Tib unharmed until tomorrow, when they expected Mary back as a pupil. Otherwise the headmistress would not have been so mysterious about the donation Mary had made, and she would have taken the little cat more openly instead of. Yes, thought Mary as she hurried her clothes on again. That was how they had done it. When Madame Mumblechook took the cat from her, she had simply pretended to put him on the broomstick, then she had tied the empty raffia to the handle, and Mr. Flanagan had sent the broomstick away before Mary had had time to check on Tib's presence. They were all in it, nice though they had seemed, and Dr. D too. Mary was sure now that he had deliberately left Tib invisible, to help Madame and Mr. Flanagan to snatch him. Cats were especially valuable, Dr. D had said, but if cats knew about magic, then Tib must have known what he was risking. Why then, that he deliberately led her to Endor College. Mary stood in the middle of her bedroom, fully dressed again, thinking. It was quite dark outside, and the wind had grown stronger, and was roaring in the treetops. There were voices on the stairs now. Great Aunt Charlotte coming to bed early as usual. Miss Marchbanks would be anything up to an hour later. It would be useless for Mary to attempt before that to creep downstairs unseen. She would have to wait. She sat down in the chair by the lamp, and opened the red book called Master Spells. 3 spells, if they were there, she had to find. She found the index page and ran her finger down. The first one she had seen before. To unfasten locks. The others would probably be more difficult, but surely there must be one to cancel invisibility, and one to undo a transformation. But there was not. She started again at the top, and went down one by one slowly. To change into stone, to turn him blue, to strike him pink, to render his hands powerless, to transform into animals, to transform one animal into another. Mary's finger checked. The invisibility spell, she remembered, had been undone by being chanted backwards. Perhaps transformation spells worked the same way. She leafed through the thick yellow pages until she found the one headed to transform one animal into another. She skipped through the spell, which was gibberish, to the note at the bottom, which read, simply, "This spell does not apply to cats, toads, or other familiar creatures of witches." So it would not work. Cats were special, but since Madame had taken Tib for transforming, there must be a spell for it, and therefore there must surely be one to undo it. Unless, and it was possible, they never did undo transformations, just went on and on experimenting, changing one miserable shape into another. It didn't bear thinking about. She went down the index again. Nothing, nothing. Ah. She had it. At the foot of the page, printed small, was a star, and after it the simple words, "The Master Spell." Mary turned to the back of the book. There it was, printed in scarlet, with a star at the start of every line, and above it, under the heading "The Master Spell," was written in a small, crabbed hand, "To undo any magic within range. This spell to be used only against magic already made. If it is used where there has been no magic, then it will come back upon the user, to his dire affliction. Beware, and say me not save in sore need." Mary read no further. Footsteps were coming creaking up the stairs. She switched the light off and waited, breathless in the dark, listening. She heard Miss Marchbanks' door open and shut, softly. A few minutes later the grandfather clock in the hall struck 11. The house settled, creak by creak, into silence. At last she moved. She switched the light on and got into her dark coat and soft-soled shoes. She dropped a torch into one pocket and the book of spells into the other. She picked a head off the purple fly-by-night and kept it carefully in her hand. Then, heart-thumping, she opened her bedroom door. It was quite quiet. The only sound was the steady ticking of the grandfather clock. The lights were out under Great Aunt Charlotte's door and Miss Marchbanks. Mary switched on her torch and crept along the corridor to the stairhead, then slowly, slowly, down the stairs, avoiding the treacherous 1-3 from the bottom, which creaked. As she reached the hall the grandfather clock cleared its throat and struck the half-hour. Mary jumped. Then the steady, soft ticking started again. Hickory-dickory-dock. The memory came to her of that other clock, the one in the lab at Endor College, with the lead weights that looked like horrid little dead mice, and the nasty rhyme it seemed to click out. She shone her torch up at the grandfather clock. Its brass face winked at her. There were cherubs engraved in the upper corners, and between them a sun with curly rays all round a jolly face, cheek to cheek with a coy-looking moon. The weights were hidden in the clock case, but Mary knew what they looked like. Fir cones, fat and tightly shut. It was a lovely, old, homely clock, and it is possible that at that moment Mary would have gone straight upstairs again and tried to forget all about the other one, if a movement at the foot of the clock had not caught her eye. A mouse, a real one, small and glossy and bright-eyed, whisking aside out of the torchlight and vanishing into the wainscot. "Wait till Tib sees you," whispered Mary, and then said to herself, in surprise, "And that's fair enough, it's the way things are, it's between Tib and the mouse. But magic isn't fair. Not on Tib or the mice, and not on those poor things in the cages, whatever they are. I'll have to go. And it wouldn't be right to use the spell book to unlock the front door either. I'll do it the way it's used to, even if it does take longer." It didn't take so very long. A few moments later the last bolts slid back and the key turned to let Mary out into the dark night air. It was so easy that it was almost routine. The little broomstick was just where she had left it, and apparently it was asleep, because when Mary took hold of it, it gave a jump and a kick that nearly tore it out of her grasp. But now she knew what to do. She squeezed the fly-by-night in her hand, rubbed the hand down the broom handle and said sharply, "Stand still." The little broomstick stood still. "That's better," said Mary sternly. She settled torch and book carefully in her pockets, got astride the broomstick, stroked it, this time more gently, with the crushed flower, and commanded it, "Endor College. Front door, and carefully, please." The broomstick, with only the tiniest quiver of a buck, leaped into the air and headed straight for the nearest bunch of stars. It was impossible to tell distance this time, or height. The sensation of speed was, if anything, greater than during daylight, because all the stars seemed to be racing and wheeling as well. It was like flying through an enormous Catherine wheel of a sky, where stars whirled and flashed, and the wake of the little broomstick fizzed with bubbles of light. Then the stars, pouring away, dwindled to bright dust, and the dusky trees sailed up and blotted them out, and the broomstick had arrived, just as it had been told. At the very foot of the front door steps, Mary dismounted. The broomstick stood quite still for her, so as she propped it in the shadow of the house wall she gave it a friendly little pat and whispered, "Wait for me, and be good, I won't be long." She stood for a moment in the shadow beside it, watching and listening. There were no lights in the windows. The alarm clock was silent. Indeed, not many sounds would be audible above the rush of wind in the treetops. This had got stronger now, almost as if a storm were coming. Mary, flattening herself back into the deep shadow between the steps and the house wall, got out her book and her torch, and shone a cautious light on the page. To unfasten locks. It was right, she supposed, to use the spell on the front door of Endor College. It seemed such a simple little rhyme. But if the lock was indeed a magic one, it was, and the spell worked. The door opened in smooth, obedient silence, and Mary, her heart thumping, stole into the hall. She shut the door quietly behind her and stood still, listening. No lights, no sound. With stealthy flashes of her torch she tiptoed down the long corridor towards the door of the lab. This was shut, but not locked. She eased it open, and was back in the horrid room she remembered. It was quite light. The furnace still roared green behind its transparent door, filling the long room with that phosphorescent, decaying light, and striking gleams and ripples of glitter from the racks of jars and flasks. The clock was ticking. Offbeat it went, with its nasty little rhyme. Hickory-dickory-dock. The mice got into the clock. Mary ignored it. She shut the door carefully, and tiptoed past the teacher's desk to the massive, locked door of the strong room. The book was still open at the lock spell. She put her hand, still faintly sticky with the fly-by-night, on the bronze seahorse, which did duty for a handle, and whispered the spell. The huge door came smoothly open, and stood wide for her to enter. Inside, the lamp still burned with its yellow light. Further back, in the dusk, the bars of the cages glimmered, and behind the bars, the eyes, all wide awake, all staring. "Tib," whispered Mary. "Tib, are you there?" No answer, only a rustling and a faint muttering, gobbling sound as all the queer misshapen creatures came crowding to the fronts of their cages. Those that had eyes had them fixed on her, beseeching. Small paws scrabbled at the bars. Tib. Surely if Tib were here, he would make some sign. She began to run along the rows of cages, peering in the faint light, calling, "Tib, Tib, Tib." In a desperate little whisper, a squirrel shot a paw out and snatched at her sleeve, and she paused. "Tib, is that you?" From the next cage a hedgehog's foot reached, urgently, and from the cage above a twisted claw stretched out to pat her hair. Mary had not thought of this. She backed away from the wall of cages, and took out her torch again, sending its beam along the packed rows. "Tib, Tib, if you're here, make a sound. Try, Tib. Try to mew. Surely you've still got a voice." But they all understood her, and they were all desperate. From every cage came small, frantic noises, as the rabbits, rats, squirrels, pangolins, hedgehogs, frogs and lizards tried, from all their differently shaped throats, to mew. "Please, please." Mary, her hands to her ears, was almost crying. "Can't you understand? I can't open all those locks, it would take hours and hours. And even if I could, how could you get away? You're all so little, and you've none of you got proper legs or wings. Please, please be quiet and let me find Tib." But they took no notice. The eyes besought her, the paws reached frantically through the bars, the little throats croaked and mewed and gobbled and cried. Then suddenly silence. Then Mary too heard what they had heard. Footsteps were coming down the corridor towards the laboratory's door.